They say when a baby is born, so is a mother. But while you are there to help your baby grow into the person he or she is meant to be, who is there to help you? Many women feel lost and alone when they become mothers, wondering, who am I now? Sometimes it feels like the transformation from woman to mother is as radical as a caterpillar's transformation into a butterfly. Did you know that inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar literally turns into goop before it rearranges itself into a butterfly? This podcast is about the goop, what soul transformation looks like as you transition from being a woman to a mom. Your baby's growth matters, but yours does too. You're not alone. I'm your host, Brittany Ming. Welcome to the Motherhood Metamorphosis.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. My name is Brittany Ming. I'm your host, and today we're talking to Julie Plagens. Julie is a wife, mom, teacher, author, and blogger. She is passionate about helping families interact in a healthy way and finding forgiveness when there is a family rift or break. So, Julie, I feel like your intro really leads in well to what you would like to talk about today, which is family estrangement and how that affects the motherhood development and how that affected you as a woman. So I would love if you could just tell us your story.
Well, thank you, first of all, Brittany, for letting me be on your podcast. I'm so excited to be invited and talk with your guests today, or with your people. So yes, estrangement is a very difficult subject. And if you have a family estrangement, likelihood that you are not going to talk about it with your friends too much. It's an embarrassing subject, and it not many people understand. And especially if you are in, a church group or something like that, you're supposed to have it all together. And I mean, even today with Facebook, Instagram, that kind of stuff just doesn't get aired out in public usually. So for me, it affected me. I grew up in a family. It was a Christian family. My dad was actually associate pastor of two mega churches in Dallas, Texas. And so if there's anybody that had pressure on them to look the part, be the part, act the part, it is our family. And so I, for years and years, just kind of swept under the rug we all did, my whole family did, any kind of grievances or, frustrations or anger, and it built up over time. So for me, by the time I was around 40, and I'd had enough, and the relationship ended up breaking then. So for me, I was caught in those years of needing a mom to call and talk to. Of course, you always need your mom, and then also raising kids. Mm-hmm. So I was in that kind of those sandwich years that I needed some support emotionally for my mom. And, and I also had two kids that, how am I going to do this differently? How am I going to be a better mother or than I felt like my mom was at the time, which turned out, now that we've talked through things, I've forgiven her, but, she did the best she could, and I'm having to do the best I could, and it's just not enough sometimes. So
I think that's really important to voice that we're all doing our best, but sometimes we do fall short. And I think that can be just like a heavy truth sometimes. Mm-hmm. So how have you worked through that grief in your own life, that maybe the grief that gap you saw in your own relationship with your mother, mm-hmm. but also speaking to the grief that I did my best, but sometimes that's not enough. Can you speak to both of those aspects?
Yeah. I mean, I had a 7-year estrangement with my parents. So there was no cards, nothing sent to me or my kids. So my kids lost their grandparents for 7 years. Mm-hmm. And I lost my mom and dad and other members of my family. My sister and I barely talked, and all the aunts and uncles. I was pretty much just left the family. And so there was that huge grief of all these people basically feeling like they died. They, left my life. And I didn't realize the toll it took on my children as well, probably my daughter more than my son. But there was that grief of loss. And then there was how am I going to do things any differently, with my own kids? And how do I keep from repeating some of the same mistakes, which I ended up repeating because of unforgiveness. And, as I look back, I'm like, I did some of the exact same things because I was not, it took me really the last 5 to 7 years to really work through forgiveness. And it took a toll on both ends. It took a toll on my relationship with my parents, and it took a toll on raising my kids as well, because that's not a good example to set.
Can you think of something specific that you ended up doing that you thought, I'll never do that? That was like that same pattern?
Yes. Well, what happened is that my parents in their early 20s ended up taking over my grandparents' restaurant. My dad had the first nightclub in Texas. And so they were living a large life. My dad was 23 and had all the money in the world. And that, he vacillated between Dallas and Las Vegas. And they did that for about 10 years. And then my parents were on the verge of divorce. They were a mess. They were partiers. And my dad one night just prayed and said, he was Italian, Catholic Italian, and just prayed one night and said, God, if there is a God, help me. I don't know what to do, and about 2 weeks later, he went to make a commercial, and it just turned into Christian programming. And the people there ended up praying, and something happened to my dad there. And he started asking questions and ended up turning his life over to Jesus. And then everything changed. My grandparents were horribly embarrassed, and it made not only local news, but it made national news. So there ended up being an estrangement because of that. My grandparents, Italians, disowned my dad. So that was the first estrangement, and I was 5 when that happened. And then come, my years later when I'm 40, and then I walk away from my own parents and do the exact same thing. So, and it didn't matter that we were Christians and my dad was associate pastor and the whole thing,
Yeah, sometimes I think that because I'm a Christian as well. And so you have these expectations that if we're a Christian family, or if we follow these tenets or these rules or whatever it may be, we think I'm going to avoid these painful circumstances, or if I do things right, things are going to work out for my family or my future. But pain affects us all, and hurt affects us all. And I think a lot of times the human response will be to either pull away or not know how to work through that because we never saw it modeled, or we saw a model that was destructive, like you repeating a type of estrangement within your own family. And that's what your story is personal to you. But I know that in my own life, there hasn't been a lot of conflict resolution modeled. And I'm trying to figure that out with my immediate family, my husband and children, in a healthier way, but also not knowing exactly how to do it with my siblings and my parents, because I have complicated relationships with my parents and siblings too. But there was that expectation of, oh, we're a Christian family, so there's going to be this good outcome, but it hasn't. It's messy. Like everybody's family, even if you're a Christian, you can go through these really difficult, complicated situations that require healing and forgiveness. So can you speak into that forgiveness process in your own life and walk us through maybe an example of how that has looked for your family? Because you have had a reconnection with your family.
Yes. Well, I want to reiterate that being a Christian does not make you emotionally healthy. You want to be healthy, and it's very hard because the Bible doesn't just say, well, you need to learn how to set boundaries and you do this and that. It gives you basic principles, but it doesn't always give you line by line things to do. And that's a very difficult thing. For me, I as well did not have good conflict resolution skills. My family stormed out, walked away, threw things. It was volatile. And so, of course, I didn't know how to resolve things with my parents. I wasn't really even allowed to say I had any issues with them when I was growing up. It was kind of like you do what you're told and be quiet.
Yeah.
So of course, the only thing I knew to do was to walk away. I had tried to tell him, multiple times towards my later 30s, and they just didn't get it, or I couldn't communicate it, or I don't know. I eventually I absolutely just blew up on them, and everything out of 40 years of history came out. And of course, you know where that ended up. That's what ended up with the estrangement.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't until I walked away that I realized that I needed to get into some counseling. And I spent about 16 months in counseling. And I learned that I was a huge people pleaser and that I did not know how to set boundaries. And those two things tied into each other because I had my own abandonment issues from my grandparents walking away and all of that growing up. And so I jumped every hoop trying to be the perfect person and trying to be the model Christian, but inside I was just dying. It wasn't real for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't until I went back and I really started addressing the lies in my life and that bad tape. And I don't know if you've had that bad tape going and, you feel worthless, and if you just get it right and everybody else does it better, everybody else knows how to do it, I can't figure it out. Those kinds of tapes that were running in my head were not biblical truths. And until I shut down the self-pity and those lies, and I started, just simple mantras like, you are loved, God loves you, it's okay to say no, it's okay if people are angry with you for saying no. And I had to learn that that was part of setting boundaries. If I really didn't want to do something, I needed to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And those are hard things to do because you're going to get some repercussions possibly for setting really hard boundaries. And I had to practice that first on my kids and my husband, and then eventually it's a great story in the way that I ended up getting back with my parents and having resolution. I don't know if you want me to go into that right now.
Sure.
But that's what I did. I had to work on lies, boundaries, and not doing self-pity to get better. And eventually, my husband and I both, we felt like after 7 years, it was the holidays. And I don't know if about you, but for me, the holidays are the worst. Here we are approaching the holidays right now. And you're trying to explain to everyone about who you're going to go to Thanksgiving and Christmas and, all of that. And it's very embarrassing to say, well, I'm not going to my one side of the family because I don't talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
So my husband and I, it was like 2017. It was or 2016, December 2016. We both felt like God was saying, you need to get back with your family. And I was like, there's no way. I don't know how to. I'm not going to their house. They're not coming to mine. We're not meeting in a restaurant. There's just no way to meet in the middle. But I really felt like God told me to start praying and fasting. And so January came around and I was like, oh, this is so stupid. I've been praying forever. And God just really impressed on me to fast. And so I fasted for 2 days. And I fasted on Monday and Tuesday. And I prayed for God to talk to my dad in a dream. Because I was like, well, he's not listening during the day. Maybe God will talk to him at night. So embarrassingly, I prayed for a hellfire and brimstone dream, one that would just scare him crazy. But so I prayed, and that week, my dad called that Friday, and he had a dream. And so it was just such a miraculous story because really God brokered the deal. He's the one that got in the middle and got to my dad to talk, and to call us.
I was going to say, what did your dad say? Like when he called?
Well, he called my husband, and he called that Friday and said, could we meet? So my husband went down to their house Friday night and didn't tell me and just said that he was working late. And so he got home, he didn't say anything. So Saturday rolls around and he's kind of like, well, I went to your parents last night. I was like, what? You went to my parents. What were you thinking? He said, your dad called and he wanted to talk. And I was like, okay. And I was like, oh my gosh, I prayed and that something happened.
Yeah.
So that was really neat, but there was no apologies. It was more like, let's make peace. Can we work something out? And so when my husband told me that, I was like, what? There's no apologies? And I was really angry. So it took 2 more weeks for me to cool down. And it's so funny because I was in Bible study fellowship. And that week, our teaching leader was talking about forgiveness. And it was like a 45-minute dissertation on forgiveness. And my chair was hot. I mean, it felt like it was burning. I was moving around. And so I was like, okay, God, I'll move forward. So I called them and I talked, with my mom. My mom was pretty fast. She apologized pretty quickly. So we got together in the next week or so, and we were eating dinner at their dinner table. And my dad pipes up and says something like, I had a dream. And I was like, you're kidding, and he said, yeah, I dreamed that we were sitting here in this dining room eating dinner together.
Oh, wow.
And he said, I woke your mom up and told her that Julie was coming home. And she was like, yeah, right, whatever, go back to sleep. You had too many enchiladas. So, and that was the next day when he called. And we were sitting there talking about the dream that he had with us sitting in the dining room. And we were sitting in the dining room.
Wow, I feel emotional, like you telling me that. Like, that's what a beautiful dream. Like, and it wasn't like you had this idea of like, get my dad in his dream, like scare him. And then the dream was just like a coming together, like a beautiful dinner.
Yeah, I didn't tell him about the hellfire and brimstone dream.
Well, hopefully he won't listen to the podcast then. But I love that. It's like your heart was still in this process of changing, and you're like, okay, reconciliation. Okay, fine. I'll pray for that. But like, I'm still mad. And then the way that God answered was just a dream of fellowship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? And I wanted your audience to know that the reconciliation did not come quickly. When there is a break of trust and relationship, that it takes time to get that back. And it took a good year before my dad actually apologized. And that we worked things through. And it wasn't all one side. I had to apologize too. But my mom and I pretty quickly worked through that.
So during that period of reconciliation, that year time, were there deeper conversations going on, or was it just we're getting together more often? How's the kids? How's the job? Like, tell us what that looked like and how your relationship was different and the different choices you made during that time.
Yeah, well, we were both trying to put our toe in the water and test each other out. And so it was slow at first and it was more superficial. And then, because my parents live almost an hour away, so it wasn't like I could go drive over there all the time and talk to them. So it was probably after that, after the dinner, then it was phone calls maybe every week or so. We would call and touch base. And then I would start testing my mom a little bit and asking her more deeper questions, on the phone, and seeing how she would respond if she was going to be angry. And we both just kept slowly pushing forward. And there wasn't, the problem with estrangement is that things aren't worked out. That's why you go away. So when you come back, it's not like everything's worked out automatically. And you've got the same people and the same problems, only I had changed in the fact that I was going to set hard boundaries. And I had to really, really work on being okay with saying no, and my parents being angry with me, and whatever that meant, that was okay, because I knew who I was despite what they thought. So there were some more, there were a little bit of bumps every once in a while. There would be things that came up, and my mom and I really worked on talking honestly. And that was one of the things I said to her. I felt like that, I couldn't be honest with her and tell her how I felt because I was scared of her being angry. And so she had to work on her response, and I had to work on not being fearful of whatever she thought or said. So that I totally, if, there's a difference between Forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness is about the offense, and God asks us to know, no matter what has happened, for us to forgive. Now, reconciliation is about the relationship, and forgiveness takes one person. It's between you and God. Reconciliation takes two people, and both sides have to be willing to admit wrongs, to work together, to build trust, do what you say what you do. It takes time. And if that person is not trustworthy, you have to set harder boundaries and step back. Mm-hmm. And I really, I want you to read my book, but I also recommend Gary Thomas's book. It's When to Walk Away. And it is a really good book because it tells you the difference between, toxic relationships and difficult relationships. And mine was a toxic one. I haven't even shared about the story of how I ended up deciding to walk away. I was very sick, and we can get into that whenever you want, but mine had turned toxic. And there's just some relationships that are difficult, and you can just set pretty hard boundaries and see them at Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter, and Mother's Day or whatever, and see them at the holidays, and that's it. And have an occasional phone call. Those are difficult relationships. But when something turns into toxic, it affects everything around you. And mine affected my health. And I was really, really sick at the time when I walked away.
Yeah, tell us that story.
I was, probably about 7 or 8 years into our marriage, I was diagnosed with proctitis. And that's kind of an ulcerative colitis, only at the lower portion of the colon. Mm-hmm. Eventually, it moved into ulcerative colitis. And by 2009, I was really, really sick. I was, I won't get too graphic, but if you've ever had the stomach flu, food poisoning and an ulcer, combine that together and you get what I was experiencing. Oh. Yeah, it was really, really bad. I couldn't keep food in any direction. And I weighed 100 pounds. I'm 5'8". I lost 30 pounds in like 3 months. And so I knew something was really, really bad. And so my gastroenterologist immediately ordered a colonoscopy. And so when I went in to get the diagnosis, after the colonoscopy, the nurse came in. It wasn't even the doctor. The nurse came in and she, I was barely awake. And she said, "You have Crohn's disease. Your colon looks like hamburger meat. We're going to have to take it out and you're going to have a bag the rest of your life, an ileostomy."
Oh my gosh.
And then she walked out the door. And do you know what an ileostomy is? It's an external bag that's where all the waste goes. Yeah. And it's noisy and it's smelly. And, at that point, I just wished I could just die. I didn't want to live this way. And I was so sick though. And so I had time to sit in the bed thinking. And that's when I decided that I was going to leave my family. I was so miserable. It was like the scales came off. I knew I wasn't just angry with them. There was hatred. I couldn't be in relationship with them without sinning. I was so angry with them.
Do you think that your sickness, your relationship with your family manifested itself as this sickness? Like, is that the connection that you made there, or that you just couldn't deal with your family and this sickness at the same time?
I don't want to put any blame on my family or my parents for me being sick. That was on me. But I think the stress definitely exacerbated the symptoms. Mm-hmm. So which one came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know. All I knew is that I was so sick, I had to get away from them because it just, I couldn't do both. I was either going to lose my colon and keep the relationship with my parents, or I was going to cut the relationship with my parents and calm my colon down and see if I could save it. And that's what happened. I saved my colon.
Okay. So your illness was able to improve, like you were able to get healthier over the next few years?
Amazingly, after I cut the relationship with my parents, within a year, I was eating pretty well, eating almost everything I wanted. And for 8 years before, I had been on this totally restrictive diet, and it was having flare up after flare up. So just removing, and that's what the doctor had said. He said, you need to remove whatever stress going on in your life if you want any hope of saving your colon. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I did. And I got into counseling, and and removed all the stress. I not only removed my family, I removed issues that were going on with my husband or my kids. We just really lightened my load.
Mm-hmm.
And I just worked on getting well.
Yeah.
So
that's really, I mean, that's an extreme step to take. And I'm sure that took a lot of bravery and a lot of like focused healing on your part. Like you had to change the way you were dealing with your body and your mind and your heart.
it was a lot of things to change at once.
Yeah, for sure. But you did see healing, I'm sure, just in your body and your soul. And I think that sometimes we don't always make that connection. We think, okay, this toxic person, blah, 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 blah. We don't make the connection between like an autoimmune disease or headaches or whatever it may be, maybe even addiction, drinking too much or binging and purging or like whatever it may be. We don't always make that connection in our life between the toxic relationship and the way what our body's doing. So having you talk about how cutting out the stress and the toxicity and things that were making you unwell and how your body experienced healing, I think is really interesting and telling about the way as women in our relationships in our life, we need to be mindful and we need to think about everything that's going on around us in order to show up in our life in the way that's going to be healthy and well for ourselves and our children.
Yeah. It didn't come without consequences, though. When I was angry, I got put in that corner. I never wanted to leave my family.
Yeah.
I never, ever dreamed I would leave my family. And I was angry that I was, stuck with two very, very bad choices. And it's not like you get a jail out of free card, because I don't want your audience to think that, oh, I just walk away and everything will be fine. There was a heavy, heavy price to pay for me walking away. I set a generational stronghold again with the next generation with my kids. I set an example of that, which thank goodness has not been repeated, but there have been some bumps, and working through that, because I had to, one of the things you have to do is you have to quit blaming everybody else. I had to take complete ownership for my behavior and not worry about what everybody else is doing. And I was a self-pity, go hide and whine and complain blamer. And it wasn't until I sucked it up and said no, and I looked at myself in the mirror, I said, you got yourself where you are. You have to, it is up to you to, with God's help, to help you get out of this. And I just had to take complete ownership of where I was.
Yeah.
And that wasn't easy, because there were offenses, clear offenses from my parents. I just had to forgive that. And that took the full 7 years for me to forgive. Yeah. And it's still a process of forgiveness. Forgiveness just isn't just one and done. It's a process and a continual choice.
Yeah. It's like a path that you walk in, not just a single step.
Right. It is a path you choose.
So talk to me about how you've discussed the estrangement with your children and how the reconciliation has affected them as well.
Yeah. Well, they, were at pretty, let's see, all of my sons, they missed my son's, all of his, high school years and some of the college years. And then my daughter, they missed 5th grade to 12th grade. So those were important years to establish relationship with grandparents, and my kids didn't get that. And so the ramification of that still to this very day is my kids aren't real close to my parents, because they just weren't there. And now my kids are busy and doing their own thing, and they see them at holidays, but that's about it. It's just, there's not a strong bond. So we lost that. So that was hard. And then, they asked questions and all sorts of things, and I tried to be honest with them. I think my kids might have thought I was too honest, maybe, and I maybe told too much. And that was probably a boundary issue on my part, that I should not have said as much. I still was working through the forgiveness. I'm telling you, this is messy, and it bled onto my kids. They didn't get out of this unscathed. It hurt them. And it's hard to say my behavior and my choices did that. but we are redeemed, and God has worked with that. And my kids still love my parents. They just don't see them as often. So I believe that my kids are not angry at my parents at all or anything. That it was between me and my parents. And my parents didn't do anything to my grandkids. I mean, to my kids, their grandkids.
Yeah.
So I think they've separated that and realized that it really wasn't about them. But there's been a lot of conversation, trying to work through what the truth is.
Yeah. And that takes time. And
It does.
there are all those facets, like your relationship with them, their relationship with you, their relationship with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those conversations can help fill a gap,
Mm-hmm.
but hurt is still there. And
It is. Yeah.
there are consequences. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We lived overseas for 3 years, and we were about 6 to 7 hours time difference from grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
And that was hard. Like we weren't able to call as much. It was difficult, and it was challenging for me because I felt like I was putting in effort with my family. Could I have put in more? Maybe. But I felt like there wasn't the reciprocal effort put in, especially with my kids on their birthdays or Christmas or things like that.
Right.
So we recently had this text from like a family chat, and my parents said, what are your kids want for Christmas? And this was a sore spot for me because I felt like that was the only time they ever interacted with my kids, but it was me telling my parents exactly what to buy them for Christmas.
Mm.
And that was their only interaction with them, was that mom and dad, my grandma and grandpa, bought Christmas presents, and that was it.
Mm.
And I said, gift cards are great, because I was tired of putting in all this effort for 5 children, coming up with all these
Oh,
lists for them to
yeah.
give presents. And they didn't like that. They didn't like that I said gift cards, but I was keeping back
Mm-hmm.
what I really thought.
Yeah.
And then they expressed some disdain for the gift card. So
Yeah.
I finally was like, I can either be angry about this inside, or I can be honest with them
Mm-hmm.
and come what may, because I have a difficulty conversing with my parents as well. So I did write about how I felt. I said, I want to it takes a lot of energy for me. And I see gift giving as relational and creativity, and you're using up my creative energy. And
Mm-hmm.
so you can either ask them what they would like, you can call them,
Mm-hmm.
you can do a gift card, or I mean, like I gave him like 3 different options, and it was a little bit of a call out, but I'm like, I have got to stop just stewing, and I've got to just tell the truth about
Right.
how I feel about this. And I
Right.
said, I want to put that creative energy back in your lap. Like,
Mm.
I can't use all my creative energy for your relationship with my kids.
Wow.
That was really hard. I was like shaking as I wrote this,
Yeah.
and it was so difficult. And but I kept telling myself, you stood up for yourself, you
Mm.
said your truth, you were polite and kind, even if you were direct, and then it's up to them. And they did. They
Right.
called my kids a few days later and they talked to them. And that was really a different step than they've taken, because before they would usually only call them on their birthday.
Wow. Yeah.
So that I was really pleased with that, and I thought it was a step in the right direction. But hearing you talk about complex relationships, I'm just sharing my own complex relationship for other
Mm-hmm.
people to hear that it's not easy, and not everybody has this idealistic like relationship with their mother or their father or the grandparents that are always around. Like, relationships are hard, and it
Yeah.
takes stepping into truth and setting boundaries and being honest with who you are as a woman, and being
Mm.
honest with your children, and trying to make steps that are healthier and
Mm-hmm.
working in the right direction.
Right. You did the appropriate thing. You didn't blow up, and then you also didn't withdraw. You set boundaries and you were honest.
Yeah. But it's hard. Like, that was a very emotionally hard for me, and something that I didn't like doing, even if in my immediate life, like with my husband and my children, I strive for honesty and authenticity and like talking about the hard thing like right away. That's different with my own
Mm-hmm.
parents, because that hasn't been the pattern with them, or my siblings. Like, it's hard. So even if I feel healthy in like one sphere, I'm working on creating health in other spheres, and it's
Yeah.
just hard. Like, it's difficult.
Well, I think probably, I'm guessing you feel safer with your family. You know, you can be honest with them and you know that there's not going to be pushback, or if there is, you're going to work through it and you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
But when there's pushback from others outside of your family, you don't feel as safe and you don't know where you stand. And it's very difficult for me. When you said shaking, you were shaking. I had a lot of shaking growing up. A lot of digestive issues, just trying to speak. And it's very, very fearful. You know, and there might be some of your audience that's like, well, I just tell them how I think. And, you know, that's the other opposite extreme where you blow up and you explode on them. And my husband hates this word, but you vomit on them.
It's kind of an appropriate word. Yeah.
It is, you know, or the other, you just withdraw and you run and hide, and neither are healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I have found the most success with doing what you just said. You set boundaries, you be honest, and you just have to be like, if they don't like it, I've done the best I can. I appropriately expressed what I needed, what I wanted. And, you know, the rest is up to them. And it turned out great for you. And I'm really happy for that.
Yeah. And I wanted to share that story too, because there were like 2 days where they didn't say anything. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is
Yeah.
the worst. But I
Yeah.
kept coming back to this. I did the best I knew how, and I feel at peace with that. Even
Right.
if like my emotional, like when I would look at that chat and say like everybody saw what I wrote,
Mm.
said anything, I
Oh.
kept like saying, who's gonna say something? And I'm like, say something. But I kept coming back to no, I did. I was honest and loving and firm, and I felt true to myself.
Mhm.
And that I didn't have anything. Yeah, I just had to keep coming back to that. Even if that brave step I took felt so scary. Like that's where the shaking came from. Like
Oh, yeah.
stepping into that bravery is so frightening,
Mhm.
but doing it will bring you peace with yourself.
And in that 2 days of waiting, that's where the toxicity can come back again, those stupid lies that, you know, while you're waiting and you don't know what they're thinking or saying. And you have to, that's where the real fight is in your mind is, okay, what am I going to say to myself in these, you know, days that I'm waiting? Am I going to say, oh, that was stupid? What was I thinking? I should, you know, are you going to go, what you did was, you know, the battle in your mind was, no, I did the right thing. I set boundaries. I told them how I felt. I was honest. And that was the win,
Yeah.
is what's going on in your mind.
Yeah.
That's the biggest fight, is what's in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think about how I want to change the narrative for my own kids. And I bet you are thinking a lot about how you want to change the narrative for your
Yes.
children as well.
Mhm.
So as you're thinking, we're going to come to our final question of it's what would you tell another woman who's walking the same path as you did? And I'm going to change that to what would you tell another mother?
Mhm.
Because I think that this motherhood relationship is so tied up with who we are as women and our relationship to our own parents and our
Mhm.
relationship to our kids. And it does get so messy and complicated. So if you were going to encourage another mom, maybe even me, like what would you say? Because like I'm hanging on your every word here and I'm really enjoying this conversation. So
Oh.
what would you say to that person?
First of all, I think you have to lean in grace.
Mm,
And because I beat myself up a lot. And I did not feel like that God loved me. And I think that was the first thing that I had to really embrace, was how much God loved me. And from there, I started getting my security. And I would tell you to work on you, work on the lies in your head, work on setting boundaries, work on owning your stuff, and stop blaming. No more self pity, no more obsessing on what others have done, because it's unproductive. I
mm,
can tell you where that goes. And I've gotten the t shirt and I almost lost a colon over it. It's just not productive. Unforgiveness, hatred, obsessing, bitterness, and it's all toxic. Forgiveness, love, setting boundaries, speaking truth, and holding yourself accountable. Those are the things that work. And so I encourage you to do those things. And I'm still practicing those things and still working on those things. I just do them more often now because I know the other side doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. You can recognize it now.
Yeah, I do. If I start with the obsessing or the lies or whatever, I stop myself a lot faster. And it doesn't go nearly as long. I may have a day where I just am a mess. And then I'm just like, okay, I got it out. It's not who I am. I have this conversation with me and God, and then it's over. And I get back to the truth, and I'm not going to wallow.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's good. That's good advice. And counseling. You said counseling helped you. I think
Ooh,
counseling can help. Yeah, a lot of people. Well, Julie, thank you so much for your honesty. I'm definitely going to post your book and your information of where people can find you in our show notes. But to end up our episodes, I have these 10 rapid fire questions that I ask everyone that are just for fun.
Okay.
So, all right. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Which Disney princess would you like to take out for coffee?
Oh, probably Cinderella.
What's one thing you must have on your nightstand?
A fan.
Oh, yes.
I hit menopause, so a fan.
Yes, you gotta be cool. And the noise helps too, that white
Oh,
noise.
yes.
Yeah. What was your go-to treat after your kids went to bed when they were little?
Oh, that's funny. Probably ice cream or cookies.
Yes. An ordinary moment that brings you great joy.
Spending holidays with my kids, just when they're both over, and it's all four of us. Those are just sacred moments because I don't get those as much anymore.
What is the last show you binged and loved?
This is you're going to laugh at this because I'm binging on it right now. My daughter is into animals, and she's thinking she wants to work with animals. And so she is into Steve Irwin's. Well, it's not Steve Irwin, it's their family. It's called Crikey. It's the Irwins. And so she's been sick the last week or so. And so we've been watching that all the time.
I love
know
that.
It's strange, but yeah.
We watched that too. That's a great show. I really like it too. Yeah. If you run out of this besides milk, you have to go to the store.
Ooh, it would probably be something sweet.
More ice cream, right?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of ice cream. I'm into these coconut rolls, and they've come out with all these different kinds. They've got a pumpkin one. They've got I just found one with mint chocolate. I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of on those right now.
That's your go-to treat. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Texting or talking?
Texting.
Yeah, I'm a texter too. Yeah, I like this though. I like Zoom, like face to face, but on the phone, I'm not as much. Yeah, I'd rather text.
Yeah.
What are you looking forward to?
I am looking forward. Well, actually, I'm just finished another book, and so my husband's reading it, and it's a marriage book, and so I cannot send it to an editor until he finishes reading it. So I'm looking forward to sending my book to the editor. And I'm looking forward to getting it published next year.
Oh, that's awesome. That's wonderful. Yeah. Finish this sentence. Motherhood is
the best thing in the world, but it's hard.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. I agree with that. All right, Julie, I'm so glad we got to talk today. Thank you for being here. If you would like to read Julie's book, it's called Estranged, Finding Hope When Your Family Falls Apart. It's available on paperback on Amazon or in any other digital platform. You can follow her on Pinterest, Instagram, and Facebook at Julie Plagens. Am I saying your last name right?
Julie A. Plagens it's Plagens. Yeah.
Julie A. Plagens. And you can find her at her blog at momremade.com.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being with you, and just many blessings on you and your 5 kids.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. Next, tell your friends. Podcasts are a slow growth type of social media, so promo works best when it's from person to person. If you know another mom who's in the goop right now, send her a text of encouragement and the link to the episode that is speaking to your heart right now. If you have a story about your own matrescence, the physical, emotional, hormonal, and social transition that occurs when someone becomes a mother, please leave a comment below. I want this channel to be a place where women can build community about the challenges and joys of their own motherhood metamorphosis. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope it encouraged you and gave you some good food for thought. If you ever have any questions, comments, or you'd like to reach out to me personally, you can email me at brittanyaming@gmail.com.